My name is Ariana Blake. I'm 36 years old, living in a quiet town about a 40-minute drive from Seattle. But 7 years ago, it felt like I was living in a modern-day fairy tale. Until it all collapsed without warning. I met Ethan Blake during my sophomore year as a political science major at the University of Oregon. He studied business, known across campus for his bright smile and the guitar that never left his side. We were complete opposites. I was serious, introverted, and grounded. He was lively, charming, and had a way of drawing every eye in the room. Maybe I loved Ethan from the moment he sat next to me in the library, borrowed a pen, and opened with an outrageously dumb joke. 3 years later, right after graduation, Ethan proposed during an early summer downpour. No flowers, no expensive ring, just him, bareheaded and drenched, looking at me with eyes that made me forget logic. I said yes, without a second thought. We got married that fall in a small ceremony in the backyard of my parents' home. His family wasn't wealthy, and all I hoped for was a peaceful start. With our post-college savings and a bank loan, we bought our first home in Kirkland, a small 2-bedroom house with a lavender-filled backyard and an old, worn kitchen. Ethan worked as an accountant for a growing tech company while I landed a job as an academic assistant at a local high school. Every morning we made coffee. He read the news while I packed our lunches. Every evening I cooked while he did the dishes. We split the utility bills, the rent, and a pile of unfinished dreams. It felt like we were living the best version of the American dream. Or at least, that's what I believed. Ethan wasn't the movie-type romantic. He didn't buy flowers or write love letters. But he remembered I liked oatmeal cookies and baked them once a month. He often came home late because of work, but always texted, "Go to bed first, I'll be home soon." I had no reason to doubt him. I remember my best friend Nicole once looked at me and half joked, "You trust your husband too much. When a guy's working late all the time, it's never just work." I laughed. If Ethan ever cheats, the earth must be spinning backward. I truly believed we had a healthy marriage. We talked about having kids and were saving up to start a family in the next 2 years. Ethan said he wanted a baby girl with curly hair like mine. I believed every word, every hug, every kiss goodbye in the morning. I loved him so deeply I didn't realize that love was being drained from me, day by day, without me even knowing. And that blindness is what pushed me over the edge, deeper and colder than any nightmare I could have imagined. I remember that morning vividly. Saturday. Sunny, quiet, filled with the smell of toast and the coffee I had just brewed. Ethan said he was going hiking with coworkers. "It's only the guys. You'd find it boring anyway." He smiled, kissed my forehead, and left. I stood in the kitchen, coffee mug in hand, feeling oddly weightless and cold for reasons I couldn't explain. That afternoon, I decided to reorganize the bedroom closet. Something I had been putting off because it meant pulling everything out and folding it back piece by piece. I stripped the bed to wash the linens, and when I lifted the mattress, I saw a tiny piece of deep red lace, tucked lightly under Ethan's pillow. It wasn't mine. I'd never worn anything like that. I'd never even picked that color. The chill from the morning crept up the back of my neck. I held the fabric like it might catch fire. My mind raced for an explanation. Some cruel prank? A surprise gift? But why hide it? I opened his wardrobe. There was a new dress shirt I didn't recognize. A faint trace of unfamiliar perfume lingered around the collar. I picked up his phone. I knew it was wrong, but in that moment, right and wrong no longer mattered. The password had been changed. I didn't eat that night. I sat at the kitchen table under the warm glow of the pendant light, staring at the red lace as if it were a living witness. Close to 11 p.m., Ethan finally walked in. Gym shirt, face flushed, sweat staining his back. The moment he stepped into the kitchen and saw me waiting, he froze. I looked up slowly. "I found this in the bedroom." I pointed to the lace. No denial, no explanation. He stopped cold, staring at me with wide, startled eyes. After a heavy pause, Ethan exhaled and sat across from me like he'd been waiting for this moment. "Who is she?" My voice wasn't mine anymore. It was cold, sharp, foreign. He stared at the floor. "Her name is Claire. We met at a client presentation about 4 months ago." 4 months. A third of a year. Over 100 days. How many late nights? How many rushed hugs before he disappeared into the shower? How many "don't wait, the meeting's running long" texts? I clenched my fists. Do I know Claire? He shook his head. No, you've never met her. She's an analyst at an investment firm. I let out a broken, bitter laugh. An analyst or a husband thief? Ethan closed his eyes. Oriana, I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. It started as... Just what? I cut him off. Was it a fling? Or simply boredom with your wife? His face turned pale. Don't say that. I know I messed up. I shoved the chair back and got to my feet. I don't need your apology. I need you to pack your things and leave. Tonight. He looked stunned. Ariana, don't do this. You don't want to talk? What about us? Us ended the night you texted Claire. I grabbed a suitcase, opened the closet, and began tossing his clothes in. I just wanted it over. At the doorway he hovered. Eyes glassy, hands trembling. Please, just give me one chance. I was your chance, and you threw it away like a piece of trash. I opened the door. Go, before I forget I was ever kind. I used to think the worst kind of pain was being betrayed, but it's not. The real pain is waking up every morning, opening your eyes, and no longer recognizing yourself. Ethan moved out one night in June. Less than 3 weeks later, I saw him hand in hand with her, Madeline Hart, the investment woman he once described with vague indifference. They were photographed leaving a Carlyle Fund event, a major private equity group north of Seattle, which turned out to be her father's company. A finance article called "Ethan, a Promising New Financial Partner," personally endorsed by investment tycoon Charles Hart. I sat in silence reading that article, hands trembling so hard I nearly spilled my glass of water. A man who once struggled with spreadsheets and overdue bills was now a rising star in finance. And me? I was still sitting in the same old chair in the kitchen we once shared, now emptied to the bone. Food had no taste. I couldn't sleep, not even for a few hours. 3 weeks passed, then 6, then 2 months like a shadow. I lost nearly 15 pounds. Colleagues at school started looking at me with concern. The principal gently suggested I take a few weeks off. I refused, because I knew if I stayed home, I'd lose any reason to get out of bed. Friends slowly drifted away. I had become too heavy to be around, missed calls, ignored coffee invites. Nicole, my best friend, texted me after I canceled brunch again. I love you, Ari, but I don't know how to help when you keep locking yourself away. I read that message 5 times before shutting off my phone. I used to have plans. Ethan and I were supposed to start trying for a baby next year. I had already quit caffeine and started taking fertility vitamins. I used to picture a little girl with curly hair in his arms while I read children's books beside them. That dream now belonged to someone else, and maybe even a different child. I felt robbed of everything. The husband, the life we built, the future I believed was mine. And what hurt most wasn't that I lost it because of a mistake, but because of a choice. Ethan's choice. One morning I stood in front of the mirror and saw a gaunt woman with greasy hair and dark circles like someone had painted gray onto her face. I touched my cheek and whispered, "Who am I?" I knew who Madeline was. The internet had no shortage of information. Only daughter of Charles Hart, founder of Hart Holdings, net worth over $800 million. She studied at Wharton, modeled for Calvin Klein before switching to managing real estate investments. Her social media was a collection of glamorous snapshots, luxury conferences, trips to Switzerland, candlelit dinners on Manhattan rooftops. And me? What did I have aside from a whiteboard in my classroom and stacks of ungraded essays? I once believed Ethan was drawn to her youth and flawless presentation, but no, he chose the shortcut. Because with Madeline he didn't have to worry about bills or running out of milk. She was a launch pad, and I was just the starting block. That night I sat on the floor, back against the living room wall, holding the wedding blanket I once picked out at Pottery Barn. I sat there, still, as if staying motionless could somehow stop everything from continuing to move. I can't remember exactly when I started to change. It wasn't like waking up one morning and suddenly finding the sunlight softer. It wasn't a song that made me cry and then feel light. It was just a series of ordinary days, layered over each other, until one day I realized I was still alive. And that was the beginning. One October afternoon, after teaching British literature, I stayed in the darkened classroom. Sunset light filtered through the window, lifting dust into the air. I picked up a notepad and pen and wrote the first sentence. He didn't break me. He cleared the fog I once called love. I started visiting the library after school, at first just to hide. Then, slowly, I rediscovered the joy of learning. I signed up for an evening course on advanced literary analysis at the University of Washington, then one on feminist theory and 20th century literature. Each class felt like a small incision, peeling away the victim label I'd been wearing. One colleague, Teresa, noticed I stayed late at school. One day, she placed a flyer on my desk. Divorced Women's Support Group, Thursdays, East Bellevue Community Library. I didn't respond to her, but that Thursday I drove there at 6:58, and I walked in. The room had only 6 women, flickering fluorescent lights, a tray of cookies, and a thermos of tea. Nothing special. But in that unremarkable space, I heard stories that chilled me. One woman abandoned after 30 years of marriage. Another discovered her husband had an 8-year-old child. One was forced to sign divorce papers by email. We laughed. Dry, rasping laughs. Some turned into tears. But in the chaos of it all, I realized I wasn't alone. A month later, I found a small apartment in Redmond, near Merrimore Park. Just 2 rooms, cream-colored walls, big windows facing maple trees in mid-turn. Not the house I once dreamed of raising a child in, but it was a place where I chose the curtains, picked the sheets, hung photos on the walls. Every corner was mine, my choice. I also started applying to graduate programs. Masters in English. I didn't want to just teach anymore. I wanted to research, to write, to create something of my own. Not what I once shared with Ethan. That winter break, I met Nolan at a liberal arts education conference. He was a pediatric neurosurgeon, invited to speak about the connection between language and memory, recovery in children. A quiet man, slow to speak, who always looked people in the eyes like time stopped when he listened. I had no intention of starting a new relationship, but when Nolan asked if I wanted to grab dinner after the seminar, I said yes. I wanted to know what it felt like to be asked, "Would you like to be asked?" instead of being told, "You have to." We didn't rush. We met every other week. Dinner, park walks, book exchanges. He didn't ask about Ethan. I didn't mention Madeline. But in that quiet, I began to understand that love doesn't have to be loud or dramatic. It can look like someone pulling over just to hand you the book you dropped, or asking if you've had lunch, then silently showing up with the salad you once said you loved. One night while I was reading a manuscript draft, Nolan texted me a single line. "I don't know your past, and I don't need to. Just know you deserve everything good that's coming." Finding out wasn't something I planned, not at all. That day was an early spring afternoon. Light rain. I had an appointment with Dr. Fields, my OBGYN, the one I had trusted for nearly 8 years. Nothing more than a routine checkup. The waiting room was the same as always. Loud reception desk, soft lighting, children's laughter echoing behind the closed doors. I was reading a magazine when the nurse called out loudly, "Madeline Hart Blake, please head to room 3. I nearly dropped the magazine from my hands. I looked up, heart pounding uncontrollably. It couldn't be. But it was. Madeline. Same face, same wavy blonde hair like she'd just stepped out of a photo shoot. But today, there were no cameras, no stage lights. Just her. With a perfectly made-up face that somehow looked drained, dark circles under both eyes, shoulders tensing slightly as the nurse closed the door to the room. I sat frozen. Part of me wanted to walk out immediately, but another part, my gut, held me there, telling me this moment meant something. As usual, after the exam, Dr. Fields made a bit of small talk. "How have you been lately, Ariana?" "I'm doing okay. I'm in grad school now, moved to Redmond, starting over." Things are slowly getting better. She smiled, but I noticed her eyes dipped for a second. Funny coincidence, a patient mentioned you today. Madeline Hart Blake said she used to know you. I gave a short, dry laugh. No, is one way to put it. My ex-husband is now her husband. The doctor paused as if realizing she'd spoken too soon. I'm sorry, Ariana. I didn't know. It's okay, that's old news. I stood up to leave, but she hesitated. Ariana. She's undergoing fertility treatment. It hasn't been easy. I know I shouldn't be sharing this, but because you once wanted a child with Ethan, I thought you should know. I remained motionless as the breeze from the window stirred the curtain. I didn't react. A vague sensation crawled up my spine, like the universe had quietly laid a hand on me and whispered, "Look, the tide is turning." I left the clinic with a storm brewing inside, not because Madeline couldn't get pregnant, but because of what she looked like now. A woman who once entered my life as a flawless symbol of success and happiness, now sitting behind a closed door, just as uncertain, just as anxious, just as unsure if things would go her way. From that day on, I no longer looked for her out of pain. I started observing. I created a new Instagram account, no name, no photo. I followed her silently. Madeline still posted, but I saw the difference. Fewer couple photos. Instead, posts about fertility diets. Vague inspirational quotes. Everything happens for a reason, even if we don't understand the reason yet. I knew those trying hardest to appear okay were often the ones who weren't. I knew that feeling. I'd lived it. I'd worn the dress, put on the red lipstick, gone to parties with Ethan, then cried alone in the bathroom after. And Ethan? He rarely appeared in her posts. When he did, he stood farther away, his smile no longer as bright as those first few months after the divorce. Behind the tailored shirt was a man beginning to crumble. I had stopped hoping for their downfall. Every evening, after finishing my research papers, I spent a few quiet minutes checking in on their lives, not out of jealousy, but because I had stepped into a different role now. The one who knew. The one who watched silently, waiting to see where life would take them. The Westwood School of Arts and Sciences annual gala took place on a Saturday night, 5 years after Ethan left me. I still remember holding the invitation, thick cardstock, silver shimmer, my name printed in elegant cursive, Ms. Ariana Blake, head of English department. I had made it. I had come so far from the woman who once curled up on the floor of her old bedroom with an empty suitcase and a shattered heart. But then, on the back of the invitation, my hand froze. Hart Crestwell Group, co-title sponsor, hit like a punch to the chest. Ethan and Madeline. That gala night, I lingered in front of the mirror for a long time. The deep navy silk dress hugged my frame, the neckline modestly cut, my hair in soft waves, makeup subtle but sharp. I didn't choose glamour. I chose silent power. Nolan had an emergency surgery and couldn't attend, and honestly, I was relieved. Tonight wasn't about love. It was about me, the survivor, the woman who had grown and now stood on her own. The Edgewater Hotel gleamed under warm lights. I walked into the lobby like it was my stage. Colleagues greeted me with compliments and admiring glances. No one remembered the woman who once ducked from the camera at a school banquet. I was chatting with the principal when I felt a cold shiver down my spine. Instinct, like a sharp wind. I turned. Not far away, Ethan lingered in a tailored black tuxedo, his hair graying at the temples, and Madeline, stunning but gaunt, kept scanning the room as if searching for an exit. I turned away, continued my conversation without flinching. But minutes later, a familiar low voice spoke behind me. Ariana? I turned and offered a polite smile. Ethan, it's been a while. He gave a sheepish grin. You look amazing. Thank you. I've worked here for 4 years now. Every gala seems to get bigger. I didn't ask what he was doing. I knew he was still clinging to his seat on the Hart Crestwell Executive Board after being stripped of large budget approval rights by his father-in-law. Madeline arrived a few minutes later. Her eyes swept over me, first sizing me up, then unease. Ariana, it's been so long. Hello, Madeline. I shook her hand with just the right firmness, no fake friendliness. I didn't know you taught here. Actually, I'm head of English, just appointed earlier this year. Madeline stiffened. Congratulations, that must have been tough. I tilted my head. Not at all, it's something I've been preparing for years. I left them after a few courteous exchanges. As I stepped into the banquet hall, I heard a whisper behind me. She really has changed. Madeline's voice. And Ethan replied quietly but clearly. No, she didn't change. She simply returned to who she really was. I was too blind to see it before. The gala proceeded with grace. When the principal gave his speech, he mentioned the contributions of the sponsors, including the Hart family. A spotlight shone on their table. Madeline gave a tight, awkward smile. Ethan stared blankly at his wine glass. After dinner, I stepped out into the hallway for some air. Ethan followed me unexpectedly. You're really doing okay, aren't you? He asked, eyes gazing into the distance. More than okay, I replied softly. I'm sorry for everything. I looked at him, the man who once was the center of my entire world, now just a rough draft from a version of life I had long since outgrown. You don't have to apologize anymore. I don't carry you in my stories anymore. He nodded, eyes glossy. My marriage, it's not what I thought it'd be. Because you misjudged everything from the start. I walked away. I didn't look back. I didn't need to see the face of a man realizing too late the cost of betrayal. The restrooms at the Edgewater Hotel sat at the end of the hallway, outside the ballroom. Quiet, lined with white marble, warm yellow lights glowing above spotless sinks. I stood in front of the mirror, touching up my lipstick after 2 hours of smiling and conversation. Outside, the party continued. Music and clinking glasses sounding like they came from another world. The door opened, then slowly shut. In the mirror, I saw Madeline walk in. Our eyes met through the reflection. She froze for a second, then kept walking, heels tapping gently against the stone floor. No one said anything. Only the sound of water running from a nearby sink. I knew you'd be here. Her voice was quiet but clear. I looked straight into Madeline's eyes in the mirror. I work here. The gala is an annual event. She pressed her lips together and stood beside me. But you knew I'd be here and you prepared for it. The dress, the makeup. You wanted to look like the one who won. I set the lipstick down and turned to her. I didn't come here to win. I came because this is my job. Madeline looked up at me, a flicker of defensiveness in her eyes, then something softer. Ethan isn't happy. Kinda surprised she said it out loud. And you think I'd feel relieved hearing that? No. I thought, maybe you should know. Maybe you already do. We tried. She looked down at her hands, her voice faltering. We tried IVF 3 times. It didn't work. Well, the doctors said low chances. Unexplained infertility, they call it. And he doesn't look at me the same anymore. The room fell silent. I faced the woman who had unraveled the life I spent almost a decade building. And now, she was unraveling right in front of me. I once wanted a child with Ethan, I said quietly. Madeline looked up. I know. I figured. At first I thought I could give him everything you couldn't. Younger, more energetic, better resources. But I didn't expect to lack the one thing that mattered. You don't lack anything, I said slowly. Except one thing. The understanding that anything built on someone else's pain is bound to crack. Madeline stayed still. No rebuttal. No defense. I turned and picked up my bag. I don't hate you. But I don't pity you either. We all choose our paths. I chose to rebuild from the ground up, and you know what? I didn't need to be prettier, smarter, or more successful than anyone. I just needed to be myself, and I did that. She turned on the faucet, washing her hands slowly. I didn't think you'd be this kind. Kindness isn't weakness, I said firmly. And it doesn't mean I've forgotten. Madeline held my gaze for a moment before turning away. I'm not sorry. because the truth is if I could go back I'd probably still do it all the same. But tonight, I wish I had understood better what you went through. I nodded slightly, without judgment. Being replaced never feels good, but you couldn't replace anyone. Ethan has to carry the weight of his own choices, and so do you. I walked out. I didn't turn back. 4 months after the gala, Nolan and I held a small wedding ceremony in the backyard of my sister's house in Tacoma. Surrounded by those we loved most, with white chrysanthemums and the peaceful smile of the man sitting across from me beneath a blooming trellis. Right after the wedding, Nolan accepted an offer from a top children's hospital in Chicago, and I was invited to teach at a renowned literature gamut high school in the area. We moved in early fall. The moving boxes were still half unpacked when the pregnancy test showed 2 lines. A week later, the doctor confirmed I was carrying twins. I cried in the car after that first appointment. I had once believed that my dream of becoming a mother had ended forever the day Ethan walked away, taking with him the future I thought was meant for me. But it turned out, that dream was just waiting for the right time, and the right person to live it with. I nicknamed the 2 little lives growing inside me Hope and Peace. This new life wasn't loud, but it was full. We shared breakfasts, read together each evening, and planned the nursery with star and moon wallpaper. Every day I was thankful I hadn't lost myself in that old journey. One Sunday morning, while standing in line at our usual corner coffee shop, I saw Madeline. She was sitting alone by the window, latte in hand, eyes fixed on her laptop screen. Dark circles under her eyes, oversized sweater, no makeup. No one with her. I hesitated for a few seconds, then for reasons I couldn't explain, I walked over. Madeline? She looked up, surprised. A flicker of something, maybe shame, crossed her face. Then she smiled. Ariana, want to sit for a bit? I pulled out the chair. When did you get to Chicago? Just over a month ago. I work for a nonprofit that supports women entrepreneurs now, no more investment firms. Madeline exhaled softly. Ethan and I are separated. Probably heading for court soon. I wasn't surprised, the rumors had been circling for a while, but I didn't comment. I used to think I'd won, Madeline whispered. When I got Ethan. When I had everything you lost. But really, I just picked up a shard and cut myself with it. I tightened my grip on my bag strap. I had my illusions too, that Ethan was my missing half, that losing him meant losing the rest of my life. But the truth is, we were both wrong. We sat in silence for a few minutes, surrounded by the steady bustle of the coffee shop. The atmosphere wasn't nearly as tense as I'd imagined. I stood up first. I hope you find yourself again. Not through someone else, but through your own strength. There was no apology in her voice, only red-rimmed eyes and something close to regret. Thank you, I mean that. We've both lost things, but at least now, we know what's worth holding on to. I walked out into the soft, late autumn sun, my hand resting gently on my belly, where 2 small lives were growing day by day. My story isn't about revenge or defeating anyone. It's about finding myself again after everything fell apart. I used to think that losing Ethan meant losing everything, but it turns out that was the moment I truly began to live. Now, I have a loving husband, 2 babies growing inside me, and a life I've built with my own resilience, clarity, and dignity. Sometimes, what feels like the end is really the beginning of a new chapter. One that's fuller, truer, and absolutely worth living. What do you think about Ariana's journey and how she faced her past? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt, inspiring stories about family and life.